Hello, CASA admins. In this training, we're going to take a quick tour around the volunteer view in your admin dashboard. So we are going to start by clicking on volunteers in the left-hand sidebar menu. And here we see a bunch of stuff. We are going to start with the basics. In the name column, we have the name of the volunteer. Supervisor corresponds with the supervisor who is assigned to that volunteer. And the status refers to whether or not the volunteer is currently active or inactive. By default, you will only see active volunteers in your dashboard, but you can change that, and we'll review that in just a few moments. Over here we have whether or not the volunteer is assigned to a transition-aged youth. And then in this column, all of the cases that that volunteer is currently assigned to, and then an edit column, which will allow you to edit the volunteer's details. Now, you might have a bunch of volunteers in your CASA.org instance, especially if you've been on the platform for a while. And if there's a volunteer in particular that you're looking for, you can search for them by any of the keywords listed here in the table. So we're going to start with name. And you see that that pulled up JASP over here. But I could also have searched for that same volunteer by searching by their supervisor's name. As you can see, that also pulls up all of the other volunteers associated with that supervisor, but it is another keyword you can search by. And then finally, if I know the case number of the volunteers assigned case, I can also search by that. I don't even have to type in the full number. And here you go, it already started typing it for me. That's another way that you can search for a volunteer. And after you're done searching, you can simply clear the search by clicking the X, and it will go back to your default view. Now, I'm currently looking at 10 rows here, but if I, for some reason, wanted to show more on the page, right now I can click next to see more, but if I wanted to show even more, so all I had to do was scroll, I would click up here where it says show 10 entries, and I would just change that number. And what that does is it just simply adds more rows to this first page view. Now, if I want to filter by some of these column headers, I also can do that. If I click on supervisor, as you can see, I can deselect supervisors to only see volunteers associated to specific supervisors. So that greatly reduces the number of rows in the table. And an important filter here is no supervisor assignment. If you have volunteers in your system who are not yet assigned to a supervisor, you're going to want to click that to see them show up here. So we've got 3 active volunteers in the system right now who do not yet have a supervisor. Now, if I wanted to switch this and see volunteers in the system who are without a supervisor assignment but inactive, I would do that by clicking status and then selecting inactive. And I can see that there is 1 volunteer in the system who doesn't have a supervisor and is inactive. And I can play with any combination of those filters any way I'd like to. Another good filter that you might be using would be whether or not the volunteer is assigned to a transition-aged youth. And you can filter by that by checking or unchecking these boxes. So right now I'm only looking at volunteers assigned to transition-aged youth, and if I wanted to change that, I would simply select no. Now, the last thing that we can customize about this volunteer view is the columns that display here. If I click on Pick Displayed Columns, I can choose to show more or less information depending on what's relevant to me. So if I, at a glance, wanted to pull the email of a volunteer, I could select Email, and their email address shows up here. Let's say I want to find a specific volunteer's email, I could just type their name, and here we go. We've got their email. I could just copy and paste it. You can also choose to display the date of the last contact made for each volunteer. So that adds a column over here. You can see the last date a contact has been made for this volunteer was August 5th. This volunteer never had a successful contact made, so it just says none for them. And I can also narrow this down by volunteers who have made a contact in the past 60 days. So here I can see very few volunteers listed here have made a contact with their youth in the past 60 days, and that's a quick way to see that at a glance. And then if I want to sort this column by volunteers who have or have not made contact in the past 60 days, I can do that by adjusting these arrows here. So now this is in descending order, so we've got zeros at the top and volunteers with the more case contacts at the bottom. If I switch this, we'll have the biggest numbers show up here at the top. So these are the volunteers who have made contact in the past 60 days. And you can see the number of contacts listed here that they've made in the past 60 days is 1. And if it was more than that, then it would be higher. And those are all of the things that you can filter by here. If you want to give yourself a more narrow view, you can unselect as many of these as you like. And that is everything you can customize about the volunteer view for CASA administrators viewing from an admin account.